thanks for joining me, Maddie. We're going to be discussing something which our clients have been asking a lot of questions around recently. It seems to be a topic of conversation, and that is around the ICP, the ideal customer profile, and what to consider, and people looking at kind of revenue, company size, and things like this. So, would you be able to kind of start from the very beginning with me and kind of walk through what that is and how it applies to your lead generation content syndication campaigns?
Okay, absolutely. So we talk about, we do across the whole industry, in lots of different acronyms. And ICP is one that we throw around a lot. So that stands for ideal customer profile. When we work with a client, they're going to have 9 times out of 10 done a lot of work on their ICP beforehand, which is something that you kind of always need to prioritize before you even start to get into kind of paid media or content syndication. ICP in general really means working out who in the market is going to have a use case for your solution. So, who's going to have the right budget, which companies are going to be the right size, scale, and just have the need and demand for there to be demand for your solution. That's going to be a wider question, I'm sure, that all marketing teams are thinking about daily. When it comes to more specifically working with Headley Media and making sure that we're working together with our clients, targeting the right individuals and companies, the ICP can be simplified a little bit more. We try to be super consultative, having those conversations, making sure that we're looking holistically at who the right individuals and companies are. But on a more straightforward way, we kind of break it down into the kind of key targeting criteria of who you're looking to get in front of. So that can be company size, whether that's revenue or headcount. Job titles, super important. I think that's one that's got loads of noise around it as the buying unit evolves and changes. But more straightforward things that kind of it's really important to talk to your clients about, because you can easily make assumptions, but kind of where geography, where those individuals are based. There's all sorts of other criteria as well, but those are probably the key ones, as well as obviously industry, what kind of, which there are likely going to be key industries that align perfectly with your solution and you want to prioritize getting in front of. I'd say those kind of key ICP criteria, as well as that more specifically, whether you are using a target account list, whether there's a suppression list in place. That's more getting into the nitty-gritty bolts of the campaign rather than just this idea of who is your ideal customer. So when we work with a client, lots of individuals will come to us with a really well thought out ICP, whether that's kind of they know exactly who they're looking to get in front of, which is always great and helpful. But it's also refreshing when we get the opportunity to kind of get in, be consultative and get and work with the client to understand who it is that they're trying to get in front of. Headley Media have a really wide audience across multiple different functions, industries, not to mention countries. So we've got a really big scope. And it's just about who within our readership is actually even going to be relevant to get the content in front of and of course generate leads for.
Yeah, I'm sure that consultative piece is really useful as well, because when you're within the business, within the marketing team, the focus kind of really hones in, but then like having that discussion that almost like expands it and contracts it a bit more, can focus things. And we've also recently been talking about, and there's noise in the market around this. You mentioned it just then as well, the buying unit, the kind of expanding buying committee within IT and tech. But so what considerations are there within that kind of expanding buying committee, and what are the pitfalls? What kind of things should people consider?
All sorts. That's a really huge question. Specifically, I see the most kind of amount of noise online, as well as that, on LinkedIn, and kind of wider thought leadership type conversations about that expanding buying unit, because it is evolving. I've been working at Headley Media for coming on to kind of 4 years, and in that time alone, the individuals in buying units for, specifically cybersecurity solutions, not to mention kind of new emerging technologies that are coming on the market. The buying unit on a job title level has evolved hugely. More and more specific job titles that we didn't even exist a couple of years ago. especially that can really vary geographically as well. So that's a conversation I have really often with my clients, is about looking to get in front of those really granular type job titles in the US. They're not necessarily going to exist so much in Europe, because the structure of teams and functions within businesses is vastly different. So that is where I'm seeing kind of the most noise, not to mention finance teams getting involved in kind of final sign off for onboarding new technology solutions, whereas maybe that was not so much the case just a few years ago. So that's where I'm seeing the most noise. However, and another point of a really important point of consideration comes around the company sizes that you're looking to target. I'm seeing more and more kind of from my clients coming out of the discussion between, okay, company size, obviously that makes perfect sense. You need to think about your solution and understand what scale of business you're looking to get in front of. Budget being a really big contributor to that. If you're selling a really high ticket, essentially technology solution, then you need to get in front of businesses that are going to have the budget on their side to onboard such a solution, as well as obviously a need. But how do we start to define that? Is that about company size? Anecdotally, in my experience, that's more in the direction we used to define it. It would all be about getting in front of the right businesses with the right company sizes. Company size often correlates to number of seats, number of, we're talking about B2B technology here. So each person is going to have their own PC and a need for that solution. However, more and more people are defining it by revenue, which is a real trend I've seen in, I'd say, the last 12 to 18 months. Actually, it's not so much about the number of individuals employed in the business, it's about the revenue that they're making. And whether that evolves from the kind of ever-growing cybersecurity threats and how we're all needing to protect ourselves more than ever online, even more so for businesses. So the higher the revenue, the higher the threats that they have to their data, to their finances. I'm not sure, but I'm really starting to see a big trend emerging where people are focusing more on targeting high revenue businesses and defining companies by that data instead of more like headcount. Is not becoming less relevant. It's still super relevant, but I'm just seeing a slight move away from that and more focus on the revenue of a business.